I'm Eleanor Wright from the village of Appleton, and I'm 85 years old.
And so, what was it like growing up in Appleton?
It was a wonderful experience, and with lifelong memories, and all the children played together. At night, we played hide and go seek, and there was one special big tree in the village that was home, and you hid anywhere in the village and you had to go find them, and that everybody enjoyed that, and we all joined in, and we had lots of swimming. We could swim at the bridge, we could swim at the dam, we could be behind the falls, and we could go out in the boats on the bay, and we could eat fish or swim, whatever we liked. And we had a really free, loving life, and everybody's mother knew where you were. And when it became dark, you knew it was time to go home. We didn't have street lights back then, but and one lady that moved to the village when I was a young girl, she taught us knitting and darning and cooking and um, mending socks, especially. That was a big thing with a darning needle. And we learned a lot before we ever got to our home ec in high school. It was interesting. And you were always helping out old folks going for their groceries or carrying their water. There was one old gentleman, I carried his water. And there were two different wells. One was a deep well, one wasn't. And he'd always warn me to get it from the deep well. And the odd time on a cold, cold night, I got it from the shallow well. And he would send me to the store for sweet oranges, as if I knew what sweet oranges were, and fresh bran muffin for their breakfast. And I was to squeeze it and make sure it was fresh. And I would carry in his wood for his wood box and fill his scuttle with coal and take that down to his coal furnace and for a quarter. And that was a lot of money, a quarter. But I'd worked hard for it. And at that time, I was a Catholic, and one of the big homes in the village was had an altar put into his living quarters, and the priest came from Almonte in the afternoon, so the Catholics went to church in the afternoon. And in the early school years, the Appleton Women's Institute sponsored bus trips or whatnot for the school-age children, and they were just great experiences. We would have never gotten to see a lot of the things if it hadn't been for the WI. They also gave us a package of zinnias, a package of carrots, and beets, and that was our 4-H project that we had to, in the fall, show what we grew and show our produce, and that was interesting too. And we did attend 4-H and traveled out into the country to the other girls' homes, and got taught all kinds of things about country living and cooking and safety and whatnot. And we would often show our wares at Almonte Fair, and there were ball diamonds in Appleton, and we would often go to ball games at night because Colley's Woolen Mill had a team, and it would participate against Carlton Place in Almonte, and we were kept very busy. We enjoyed life. We really had the life of a child, an enjoyable child, Lots of interesting things going on. And there was the odd mischief too.
What kind of mischief?
Well, there was one gentleman had a beautiful apple orchard that he would never share, and he got robbed quite often. When you knew his lamp was blowing out, you went in and shook the tree. And there was one evening he was visiting my mother, and my brother came in with a shirt full of apples, and the old fellow said, "That guy has quite a swelling." And my mother said, "Yes, I think he's got a swelling enough for an apple pie." So, but we had a very, very enjoyable life. We lived in the water. Winter and summer we skated and swam and took sleigh rides to Almonte, the Huskies. Yeah, it was just a lovely place to grow up.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody was your friend. Everybody. So.
My name is Brian Gallagher. I live in Almonte. Pretty well lived in Almonte all my life, other than a few years I lived in Appleton for 5-6 years, I guess. Spent a lot of the time on the farm outside of town, and farming, everything from milking cows to drawing in hay to. And when I was on the farm, I guess when I was about 8, I learned to drive the tractor. It was very interesting, and then it wasn't, because I remember getting out of school in June and thinking, oh boy, get the summer to ourselves, and come out and find my uncle just outside the door in the truck ready to take me to the farm to draw in hay. So I spent most of my summers there. Then about 14, I got into a confrontation with him, left, and ended up getting a job in the mill here at 14. And while I was a summer, I think I turned 15. So I worked there for 2 or 3 years, and then went to an athletic camp, Couchiching in Lake Aurelia, for a couple of years, or a couple of weeks, for when I was about 16. And then when I came back, I got a job with Almonte Hydro, and I was there basically for the next 50 years. So, and well, did everything except when we were young. I mean, there were bicycles, there was swimming in the river here, there was, of course, swimming in the river in Almonte. Then they had a couple of big change rooms and a canteen and a regular lifeguard most of the summer. Don Maynard was a high school teacher then. He acted as a lifeguard a lot of the time, and they had boats to rent. So it was quite a operation there in the summertime. So I don't know. I just spent most of my time working, and well, we wandered around. Of course, we played hockey and football, and track was a big deal as far as I was concerned. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. That's pretty well the story.
Mm-hmm. In the winter, so when you weren't working on the farm, I mean, what would you do to spend the time other than school?
We one of the great tricks was Devil's Trail in the Spring Bush. I remember commandeering a big pair of work boots, and we used to go down the trail standing up. It was quite a trick to do that. Mm-hmm. And then everything from cardboard to whatever for our sleighs to there. And I didn't do any amount of skiing or anything like that. I don't know what skating, cleaning the ice during periods for the seniors hockey, and if you did that, you got a pass to skate on the.
Oh, really?
So that was one of the things we did, and I don't found everybody in Almonte those days was friendly. But mm-hmm. Then when you're that age, you know everybody, the mm-hmm. kids, and then when I ended up being manager of the Hydro, well, I knew pretty well everybody that was in town or moving into town, because I'd see their accounts and be working with them. So anyway, it was a good place to grow up, great place to grow up.
Yeah.
Well, I'm Marilyn Snedden, and I just turned 81. Puts me in the class of an older woman, so I've been told. And I was born on the what used to be the 10th line going from Almonte to Blakeney. Now it's called Martin Street North. And when I married my husband, Earl Snedden, across the river, I just moved over to the 9th line. My maiden name was Robertson, so my father was George Robertson and my mother was Edna Timmons, and I had two sisters, Rosalind and Fern. So we were only three girls, and of course we were on the farm, and we're from a very early age we're doing lots of chores. Like apparently I was the one milking the cows, and some of them we had hens and pigs and horses. Of course, everybody had a mixed amount of animals in those days. It wasn't specialized farming. So in the beginning, we still used horses for work in the fields, and I remember one job driving the team of horses on the hay loader, and my father was on behind trying not to get buried with the hay that was coming back, and you got yelled at quite a bit if things went fast. You learned how to take criticism. So growing up, we went to a one-room school, SS number 15, Ramsey, and it was just half a mile away from our farm, which was easy compared to some people who had to walk up to 3 miles to their one-room school. And we had no organized sports then, but there were things like anti-eye-over, throwing the ball over the roof, and we played softball a little bit, but of course no organized games inside like basketball because we didn't have an inside court. And you had a wood stove that usually somebody was paid a little bit to start the fires in the morning and clean out keep the wood fires going through the day. And so it was very different than now when you're in your big classrooms with lots of kids. And when we went to high school, school buses had just started going around picking up kids, and the bus picked us up and then went all the way to Pakenham and then all the way back up to Almonte. So we had a long bus ride, lots of hijinks on the bus. But so in high school we did a basketball and organized volleyball and track and field and those kinds of things, and went to compete against other schools. And in those days, there was no separation of Protestants and Catholics when we had prayers. Well, there was a separation in a way in the morning. We all went to the same school, but when it was prayer time, the Catholics went to one room and the Protestants went to another, so we were separated that way. But there wasn't a separate high school like there is now. And so I was on the student council president and on the sports teams and enjoyed high school. And of course there was no such thing as any of this high-tech equipment, and we listened to the radio. We used to have certain shows like the Lone Ranger and that kind of thing that you just sat with your ear to the radio, and you never missed those kinds of shows. And we had record players that played 78s and 45s, and I understand vinyl is perhaps coming back, but that's as modern as we got. And country music was pretty much the type of bands that were around and what we had at the school dances, although there was some for a prom and that you might have a classier band that played I guess you'd call it pop music, but and a lot depended on the teachers you had. Maybe it still does, but back then, especially in the one-room schools, if you had a good teacher, you were very lucky. But some people had teachers who weren't happy with their job, and so they suffered. But for the most part, they were dedicated, and I often think how the teachers in the one-room schools were so isolated. Most of them didn't drive a car, and they boarded in a home of some of the pupils, and so that could be a bonus or a minus. Sometimes they were extra hard on the pupils from their homes, so that it didn't appear to be choosing favorites, but in other ways they were considered to be favorites, so it could work both ways. Yeah,
How about in the winter? What are some of the things you would do in the winters to keep yourself busy?
well, if you had you, I lived on the Mississippi River, so you would wait until your father tested the thickness of the ice, and we'd always clear off a rink. And I do remember one special year, I think it was in the 50s, when the whole Mississippi River froze over, and there was no snow on it, so you could skate miles up the river and up and down the river, but usually it was covered with snow and you had to scrape it off. So sometimes the men did curling on the river, but and when my children were growing up, of course, there were hockey teams, but when I was growing up, it was very nothing organized for kids to play hockey or that. You had your basic skates and you just skated on the river or the creek, or perhaps your parents might flood a rink if you weren't near the creek. But and tobogganing, of course, we had lots of hills, so that was always, when I look at them now, they were quite dangerous where we used to toboggan, but the steeper the better, that's what you thought.
My name is Hector Mcallister. I live in Clayton.
How old are you?
I'm 14 years old. I don't live in Almonte, obviously, but I spend a lot of time in Almonte, going to school and working in Almonte and staying after school with a lot of other students in my class. I do go to a lot of fairs. I go to like Kelt Fest and the Almonte Fair and Blues Fest. I also go to like Middleville Fair. I go around a lot, and then I do horseback riding. I do archery. I fish. I hunt. I haven't lived in Clayton my whole life. When I moved to Canada, like 9-10 years ago, I first lived in Ottawa. Then I lived near Perth, and now for 5 years I've lived in Almonte. My question would be like, what do you think are the biggest differences to living in rural Mississippi Mills to now?
Well, we had a very busy general store that contained everything from overalls to rubber boots to castor oil to oranges. And there were big posts in the store, and the big branches of bananas would hang down, a bag of onions would hang down, or a bag of turnips. And one side was dry goods, the other side was the groceries, and the post office was there too. And it was a good place to meet friends, especially on Saturday night when the farm folk came in for their week's supply of groceries. It was great when they brought their family with them.
Okay.
I don't think there's as much to do now. Like there was the theater, and there was a regular to go to the theater was Saturday afternoon matinees or during the whether with Peterson's ice cream, they made the ice cream there, and that was a big deal.
Well, when it comes to, I'm involved with Almonte Fair still, and that's one big difference. It used to be a huge event with horse races and all kinds of animals being shown, and now with fewer and fewer people, especially in dairy, they're concentrated into a few farms. So the shows aren't as big as they used to be, and the children, so many of them have no connection even with grandparents to a farm, so there's a lot more education needs to go on to try and keep everybody on board. And of course, you always have the midway, but now they have usually have dances with beer, and that or some local band would provide some music, and there'd be local talent shows sometimes, or they'd bring in some kind of an entertainer, but it was a lot lower key than it is now.
Hello, I'm Carter Stevens, and I'm 14, and I live in Almonte. And growing up in Almonte has been wonderful.
Question: What makes growing up in Alma wonderful? What about it is the funnest part?
Everyone is kind and joyful, and
You're wearing a Titans hockey sweater. Do you like
Yeah.
hockey?
yeah, I like hockey. The hockey associations are awesome, and there's always a spot for anyone who wants to play, no matter what level you are. And
Okay. What about in the winter? What do you like doing in the winter, or in the summer? I mean, what do you like about the summer?
in the summer,
Alma?
I like going boating and biking with my friends, going to the park and playing basketball and running around. And
Nice.
The question I would have for a senior growing up is, what music did you listen to, and where?
My father had a Victrola, and we would crank it up, and we would play his records, and then we got that we could buy our own. And we also had a piano. My father played the violin and a few other instruments, and my sister Lorna played the piano. And we would often have the neighborhood boys come in, and we'd all dance in our living room, and that was just about every Friday night. And most of it, I'm sure, was country and western, because they've all learned how to waltz. So, and that I enjoy when I go out now and see somebody waltzing.
Well, the first music I listened to was CFRA had at noon there was a Farmer's Almanac or something, I think they called it, and then there was country music played on it. That was the beginning, and then the music was, well, it was old music, old LPs and old gramophones, and tell you how archaic it was. I remember being at the farm with no electricity. I remember my uncle taking the battery out of the car and bringing it in. He had an old radio there with alligator clips on. He clipped it onto the battery so he could listen to the Montreal Canadiens on Saturday.
Onto the car battery.
Yeah, well,
Oh.
yeah, there was a 12 volt radio, and you hooked it up that and listened to the hockey game or football game, whatever it was on. So, and so that was and I remember mother listening to a series on radio of I think The House on the Hill was one she used to listen to all the time. It was one of those ongoing series. She had to listen to it every now and then. So I don't know. We didn't music wasn't a big thing when we were young. Not until we got into high school and started listening to rock and roll and that kind of.
My name's Mila Brown. I'm 12 and I live in Almonte. Growing up in Almonte, I feel lucky that I grew up here because it's such a small community that everyone knows each other and it's safe. In my extracurricular activities, all my friends from school are in there, so it helps build strong relationships.
What kind of extracurricular activities do you do?
There's like soccer. When I was little, I did hockey with my school friends, and then just going to the park and hanging out together.
Nice.
A question I had was for someone would be, how has Almonte changed from when they grew up?
Appleton has really changed because of all the new laws that have come in, like to have taken away not really the rights of the river, but you aren't free to swim at the bridge anymore. You're not free to swim at the dam anymore, or behind the falls. Everything is a no-no. And that was such a big part of our life. And we could boat on there as well, go upriver and float down and really, really enjoy it. And families, I think, connected a bit more now that Appleton is a little bit modernized. You don't get to know the new people as quickly as you did in the olden days. And there's fewer children now. When I had a daycare, there'd be 12 children at my bus stop. I don't have any anymore. There's no children. It's a big change for the village. There are children here, but not near the children we had long ago. It's getting to be a retirement community. But a lot of those people are very nice. So.
I think the biggest thing now is access to the city. Like, I mean, if you're 16, you can generally have a license now. You're in the car, you go to the shopping centers and malls, and we never did that. Like, we just didn't have that. We did, but it wasn't the same. There wasn't the same desire to go to. Well, a lot of shopping centers weren't there. You know, the roads into the city were different. You know, it was just Highway 17 and Highway number 7, and they were the main arteries to, you know. So I don't know. I think we did more swimming and Flume, and you know, swimming at it's Kavanaugh's generating station now. We used to swim off the bridge there quite a bit, and as I say, and the beach, and the bubble bath on the other side.
Hi, my name is Ryan Jones. I live in Almonte, and growing up here was really great because all my friends, they're here, and it's like a small place. Everyone knows everyone here. I like to play hockey, like to hang around with my friends around in the park and stuff. And yeah,
What do you do in the parks with your friends?
we like bike around, play basketball, like everything basically.
Nice. What about with your family? What do you like doing with your family in Almonte or in the area?
We like, I don't really know. We like just hanging around with our neighbors and stuff sometimes. We have like parties and stuff. So. What was it like? What activities did you do in the summertime?
Well, the hide and go seek was just a great thing. And we used to play softball. There was a ball diamond up near the museum and one over near Herb Sinetton's farm equipment place. He had a big field cleared out. There was a ball diamond at Nelson Sims's farm. And everybody enjoyed the activities. Different organizations, really the WI, always planned an outing for the children, and that was a big experience for us to get away from home and travel by bus to see something different, like Upper Canada Village and whatnot. That was a big deal.
Almost like a school field trip today.
Truly, really, it was. And all the children played together, I don't remember of having bullies. I don't remember of that at all.
Boating on the Mississippi, I guess. Boating like paddle boats, like one of my friends' dads made duck boats, which were pointed at both ends. And so we spent a lot of time swimming and on the river in the boats, fishing, snorkeling, you know. That was a big summer activity. I don't know how we filled our time. There were always games at night in the summertime too. When we were younger, playing kick the cans or some things like that. You know, there were games of basically a modified hide and seek type thing, and that was great to play that about dark and dusk and run around. So.
Well, we used to go swimming after we'd been in the hayfield all day. We used to take our rowboat and go down and swim at Blakeney, and that upset the neighbors across the river who were still doing hay. Ended up my husband's family was the ones that we used to tease because we were going to swim, and so we had softball tournaments a little bit, but in the haying time and then the grain time, and because we were using horses and then tractors and nothing like the big equipment now, 90% of your time was tied up working, which probably gave you a good work ethic.
Hi, my name is Maya O'Connell. I am 12 years old and I live in Almont. I enjoy playing soccer for Almont Soccer in the summer, and throughout living in Almont, I've played hockey, basketball, done dance, and played soccer.
What do you do for fun?
I go hunting. I like walking around town to see all the shops, and I enjoy getting ice cream around town.
Where do you get your ice cream?
Daily Scoop.
That's a good spot. And what question do you have for a senior who grew up here?
What is one thing that you wish Almont still had when you were growing up in Almont?
I wished we still had a community hall. That was a real gathering place for every age, and the country folk and the village folk, and it was a nice warm place to be. And I can remember as a young woman getting films from the National Film Board and showing them on Sunday afternoons, and the mothers always contributed homemade bread and baked beans or something for after the movies, and kids really enjoyed that. We really did.
I think there were definitely more organized sport. There just doesn't seem to be the same development of sport and ball, and that may not be Almont, it may be just the way things are going. Like there were lots of ball teams, softball, little baseball, I think there were more activities that you could participate in as you're growing. Hockey was, minor league was developing then, minor league hockey. I think Don Maynard probably had a big part in that. He helped, he pushed a lot for that. He pushed for the track that's in Almont now.
We used to have a dance hall at Blakeney for a very short time. The cheese factory was converted into a dance hall in the 1950s, and it was a great place to congregate, and everybody enjoyed going there, and it only lasted 3 or 4 years, and then it burned down, and that was the end of the dance hall. But that was pretty exciting to go to when you were younger, and like I say, it was usually country music, and I think the Sneddons got paid 5 cents a car to park them on their land or something like that. Money maker, but I'm probably forgetting some things, but I mean, they had a Pakenham fair at times too, and Middleville Fair, and some of those are still going, but and Perth Fair was a big deal to go to that too, but and we had church, of course, on Sunday, and sometimes twice on Sunday. In the early days we had a little church in Blakeney, and I played the organ there for a little while when they were desperate for somebody to play. But used to be pretty cold in the winter time when you were.
Hi, my name is Will. I'm 13 years old and I live in Almonte, Ontario. Some things I like doing is playing Dungeons and Dragons with my friends, playing at the park, and hanging around with my family. Yep.
What do you do at the parks?
At the parks, we play football and play on the play structures. Yep. That's what we do.
And what about in the winter? What are some of the things you do?
We sled down hills and have snowball fights.
Okay, and what's a question that you have for a senior?
Did you do martial arts when you were a kid?
I I played Cowboys and Indians with my brother. And I was always the Indian. I was always tied up. I was always caught. And my mother would be looking for me, and my brother would say, I don't know where she is, but I would be tied to a tree somewhere. Yes, martial arts trying to get undone. Oh, dear. There would not have been martial arts, but we certainly knew how to use a slingshot and a fishing rod.
Always little scraps over something or other, you know, but it wasn't really martial arts. I don't know whether we even knew the word at that time, you know. There was boxing was a big thing. And I remember watched when television did come in, watching Friday night there was Gillette Cavalcade of Sports, so that was boxing, you know, regular every Friday night there was a program on that, and later on wrestling was, but that was kind of, you know, you had to be into that kind of. So
Never even crossed my mind. Sometimes we used to wrestle with our sisters, but that was just friendly. Nothing. I don't remember anything like that being taught at all. That's an easy question to answer. Maybe in the cities.
Were fights common at all?
Oh, fairly, yes. Especially at the dances where booze wasn't sold inside and they'd be drinking outside. There would be fights quite often, but I wasn't involved in it. That was the boys. Yeah, yeah.